Just a quick little exercise in just in your own mind there. It'll give you just a few seconds. Of course, this is a class on worldviews, at least the first part of the class. I've been out of town, don't hate me, been in Hawaii for a week. But don't, I can't say well, sorry for you, but it is like 4 in the morning in Hawaii right now. So I got in at 2 this morning, so yeah, I guess. But I do want you to, this class was designated to be about how worldviews are shaped, how they're formed, and even how they're challenged. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But just a quick exercise. So I think Sterling and Darrell, after that, did a really good job of defining what a worldview is. It's very simple in case you weren't here in those first couple of classes. When you hear, well, worldviews, it almost sounds like, well, it's kind of philosophical. It's really not. It's just really how you view the world, which lens are you going to view the world through. And so when you think about how worldviews are shaped, how they're impacted, I want you to do me a favor, if you would. In your own mind, just think about 30 seconds. What habit have you had in your life, either early on, now, all the above, that's really shaped how you view the world? So just what habit has most impacted how you think about God, how you think about your family, how you think about your what drives your daily decisions? What habit in your life? So just think about that just for, I'm going to be quiet just for 15 seconds. Okay, I want you to hold that thought for a second. Now, this might not be automatic for you. Maybe this is applicable, very applicable to you, or maybe it's not at all. But for some it will. What has there been an event, either in society or just an event that's happened into your life, that's really shaped how you view the world, how you look at God, how you look at humanity, how you look at the world itself? Has there been an event really in your life? Again, sometimes it's a dramatic event in the world, or sometimes it's very personal to you. Just think about that just for a moment. Okay, I'm not going to ask for any comments quite yet. I want you just to hold on to that just for a moment. I do want to give my best shot at just kind of just a little review on what a worldview is. A good teacher would have had a whiteboard ahead of time, but I'm not. So you have to imagine this. So I kind of played around with what I heard Sterling and Darrell talk about, and they really talked about several things that make kind of drive a worldview, and I frankly agree with everything they said. And so it's really so I kind of came up with an acronym, and think about adopt it, like you're adopting a child. Adopt it. So the A is for authority. So really, who or what tells you what to do? Who tells you what to do? So you got A for adopt, for authority. And then you have your D is for destiny. D is for destiny. It's like, really, where is history going? And to maybe make that really more pointed, where are you going? So who tells you what to do, and really where you go? And so your A, your D, and your O is for origin. Where'd you come from? This is going to be this is going to shape everything we do for the next several weeks. It all comes out of these basic letters. Who tells you what to do, or what tells you what to do? Where are you going? Where are you going? Your O is for origin. Where'd you come from? And so your next is your P, adopt, your purpose. Why am I here? Why am I here? Your T is for truth. That's like what's moral. What's moral? And finally, your T, your I is for identity. You know, who am I? Who am I? So adopted. And so now I want you to think about that we can be super complicated about worldviews. There are all sorts of nuances to the worldview. But it really does come down in the most broadest brush possible when you talk about the two very basic views. It's like, are you going to have a God-centered worldview? And as Darrell pointed out, there's lots of ways we can do the God-centered worldview. But basically, are you going to look at the world through the lens of a supreme being? Or are you going to look at the world through just being what I call a materialist? And that's not somebody who's materialist, how we sometimes say that word, like we just crave things. It just means this world is all that it is. Now, we have had somebody close to us fall into, my family, fall into this camp of materialism, that this world is all there is. And I just want to say from just personal experience, that is a dangerous, and I'm not one on fear mongering. That's not my way. You've heard me teach before, but that is a dangerous camp to be. It's tough. It's tough. When you think about all those things we just mentioned, it's like, so you either when I decide what I want to do, either I find it within myself, or the wisdom of the world. I either find that in mankind, or I find it in God. It's really that simple. And you start driving all these decisions. It's like, where is my destiny? Well, this world that all there is. What's my purpose? I mean, it's hard to find a lot of purpose if when you die, that's it. When I think about just really who I am I just an animal? Am I just this collection of atoms floating through space? And I'm also, as I'll say by way of disclaimer, I'm also not a straw man guy where I just try to just build some false caricature of a different philosophy. But if you follow that worldview all the way to the end, that's exactly what you get. I mean, you have no purpose. You're just a collection of atoms floating through space, and it is a terrible, terrible existence. Or, again, not trying to oversimplify this, but on this side of things, it just changes everything. And I love what Sterling did last week by stressing that point. Yes, when you talk about this concept, we are going to have to dive into some philosophical views of life. But ultimately, are you gonna put your camp, your life, into the camp of God? That He is the origin of everything. That He gives you purpose. He gives your ultimate destiny. He tells you who you are, that you're special, created in the image of God, and you have a great purpose for being here. I mean, to me, those are the most basic choices of life. Why really am I here? And I think the wisdom of doing a class like this, that I've never, not only not ever taught, I've never even heard of a Bible class like this, actually. And I think it's a super wise class. And I had nothing to do with it, by the way. I just got suckered into teaching it. So no compliment to me. But it was a very wise class to engage in. So it really does get to the very basic issues of life. And, last week, Sterling kind of really made a point about really driving the point home about just, it gets down to the very minute detail of why we make decisions, like even down to the idea of if we're on time somewhere. And I want to augment that just a little bit before we get into how we shape our worldview and how they're challenged. I just want to dive into that just a little bit deeper and give my best shot about why this topic, why this class is so important. So the class is right. It does drive down to the very minute detail of if I'm going to be on time somewhere. And then you've got the very esoteric way. It's like, why am I here? Where am I going? And things like that. It's so funny when you have multiple kids. It's like, I've got one kid, and it's a male, so you can guess which one it is. It's like, I've got one kid's like, that's what he thinks about. Why am I here? Why do I exist? and it's just an interesting person. And so, and I've got one kid, and it's a female, so guess who that is. She's not thinking that. She's not thinking that. You know, she just, God told me what to do. It's just so simple. And so I want to kind of split the difference here and not talk about the most minute detail, which that's a great point. And I don't want to get too esoteric there with like, why do I exist? Just in case you fall like me, probably in the middle of that camp. I want to talk to you about like what I struggle with this worldview. And it has to do, and I hope this will prompt some thoughts from you all. I can learn from you. But what plagues me with this worldview concept, how I view the world, is like, well, how do I spend my time? How do I spend my time? Isn't that almost everything you do? And I'll say one more thing. How do I spend my money? But those two are tightly tied together, at least in my life. How do I spend my time? How do I spend my money? Because if you really is contrasting, and I did that on purpose a few months ago, is contrasting as these two camps are, this nihilistic, floating through space, no purpose, in this box of the universe is all that exists, versus this beautiful picture of what God paints for us in Scripture. Between those two worldviews, as contrasting as they are, when I really honestly reflect on how I view the world, not just intellectually, to me that's the easier part, but how I exercise it in practice. Those two worlds collide much worse than I would like to give it credit for. Much worse. Because if I really do adopt completely the worldview of all those answers I mentioned in the adopt it sense, God tells me what to do. Every single person matters. This life is not all that there is, not even close. There's this life to come. I have this much greater destiny, and so do all my other fellow mankind. It's like, then that becomes very practical about like what I wake up and do every day, what I spend my money on every day. And I think when those two worlds collide is when you start putting this view of the world, how I view God and how I view my fellow man. And that's when it gets personal to me. So I just want to go back to the question now. So now that I've kind of stressed what this class is about, what was your answer about what habit has shaped how you view some of those things or all those things? What happened? You're so talkative. What's going on? Prayer. Who said that to her? Okay. Prayer. That's it. Absolutely. What else?
Going to worship.
Going to worship. That's what all these answers are going to be great to try to get to. But that was, for me, that's probably the habit. It's the most consistent that's impacted me. It was the exposure of coming to the assemblies is what really helped me understand this view of the world that I have, that very good prayer. My wife she's not in here, so I can say it. She's just a prayerful person. That would be her answer. Yes. What else? Yes, ma'am.
Keeping your head in His Word.
I love how you worded that. Yes.
I feel like throughout my life I've had different things that I've encountered that have, either skewed or made, the world seem a certain way to me. But here, recently, I think just working around, 5 and 6-year-olds helped me think of the world in a different way. Recently in science class, we've been just talking about how or what makes different surfaces feel certain ways.
Yeah.
And, taking the students outside and having them feel the hot slide and having them feel the trunk of a tree. And why is the trunk of a tree, why does it feel less hot than the slide on, out in the sun?
Yeah.
And, I think adults make life so complicated. But if you think about it, those concepts of the sun is the reason that surface is hot versus the trunk of the tree or whatever it might be, a picnic table under an awning, that it's cool, it's cooler than that because it's in the shade. That really is an amazing concept and designed by God. And I think just working with children causes me to have sometimes less patience with adults because the things that we view as important, aren't as important as what we make them. So I think that working with children is really
that's a unique answer, and I like that very much. I won't put you on the spot. I've been a part of the class. I might come back to you on that. Since you have experience at that age, I've got my own questions about that. That's great. Anybody else? What a great answer. Yeah, please.
The one thing as Christians, I think we all do, but we don't think about is every choice that we're given, we're always analyzing not just what we want, but what God wants. And I don't know if that's a habit, but we subconsciously.
Well, hopefully it's a habit.
Yeah, but I think as a Christian, it's something we all probably do to some degree that I don't know what we think about consciously.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. But if it's but I wouldn't necessarily that it's a habit by default. Maybe it is subconscious. But I'll tell you what, making it a conscious habit would be a good one. Yeah, I've not thought about that before exactly. Yeah. Anything else?
service.
Yes.
We need to serve other people.
Yes, great. Glad you said that. Yes, absolutely. I mean, sometimes really that's putting things into action like that, but not the prayer and Bible reading is very active and going to worship. But yeah, serving others. That's actually excellent point. What about any event? And if it's too personal, don't feel like you need to share. But this was important, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But is there an event that you comfortable sharing that's happened to you that's really shaped how you view the world? Anybody at all? No, it's okay. Yeah, please.
I lost my father in a car accident when I was 4 years old, and so that event shaped the rest of my life.
That'll do it.
And it shaped my view on things. I didn't have a male figure in the home growing up, so it shaped how I was a father and that relationship and a husband. I didn't have that example to look back on.
So far-reaching.
In a negative way, it affected my view of God in a lot of instances, because anytime anything negative happened, I wanted to blame God. How could he allow that to happen? And so event really shaped my life.
That is a horrible example, and yet an instructive one. And it really, I hate that it's so instructive, but really it ties in what I was going to get to, actually. So that's a terrible example, but a very instructive. Absolutely. It's going to be a point we'll make in just a moment. Any other thing that was very
No, I
good?
was going to say the same thing. Losing someone close to me didn't happen until I was 23,
Still plenty young enough. Yeah.
but it totally reshaped, dismantled, reshaped my entire life.
Yeah. And if we had time and it wasn't so it's very personal, it would be instructive to really dig deep into those two things, because it's interesting. It impacted him before he had a worldview. It impacted you after you had one. And that's going to be a point. I hate that happened, but very instructive. Yeah, anything else, please?
Having children is
Why did that impact?
you're officially living for someone else. Even when you're married, you still think of yourself.
Sure.
And that's the center of your world. But once you have a child, then everything changes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, on the side of them with death, my grandmother's funeral affected me, just because when she passed away, when you go to a funeral, the preacher's talking about how you need to come to Jesus, how you need to take this moment, how death is important, and no one had anything to say at her funeral. Like, it was only good, positive things, because my grandmother influenced so many people, and it made me look at wanting to do more so that people would say good things about me, so that I know that I'm going to heaven. So it affected me.
That's very beautiful. when Solomon said it's better to go to a paraphrase, a house of mourning than a party, he knew what he was talking about. Because almost all funerals affect me that way. You know, some way more than others, super close, right? But it's like all funerals make me really think. So very, very good. Not maybe world reshaping, but all of them make me think very well. We'll move on to anything else just in case. So really the point of that is this. Is like, so, because I really just try to think through this week, really just what does really shape? I mean, what does shape a person's view of the world? What shapes a person's view of God and family and how I treat people? Is it these big, giant events, you know, whether it's tragedy or whatever it might be, or is it these daily habits? And I would contend that really it is the daily habits, and bear with me on how that was reshaped. But and then you're even in another unique category. But usually it is these daily habits that are just these daily drips that happen all through your life. We're going to do this a lot in just a moment. And then when you have this big event, how you interpret that event is really going to be very, very relevant to how your habits were all those years. And that's why when you get into like just good psychology, you know, what happened to you at 4 years old is in a different category because it wasn't fair. Because that happened before you had a chance to develop habits. That's why early childhood trauma is so challenging to work through. It really takes a lot to work through that, and maybe a lifetime he might testify to that. And so that's why you hear about early childhood trauma being so challenging. So we're getting those daily habits in just a moment. I do want to take a moment and talk about what I think all 6 of those letters that I went through collapse into one question, at least how I view it. I hope this is the right thing to communicate. And that is the idea of truth. You know, what is, we hear that expression, or that question phrased in that expression, what is truth? And I want to break this very, very practical, because it really comes down to what your worldview is, how you view the world, God, humanity, your own existence. It does come down to what is truth. When you think about, there's multiple answers to this question. When you think about why Jesus came into the world, this is only this 30 seconds. Don't drag this out. Quickly, what are your quick answers? There's something meaningful here. Why did he come to the world? Easy answers. Quickly. Save the sinners. Save the sinners. Come to save and seek which is lost, ransom for many. What else? Be an example, conquer death, destroy the works of the devil. To go even further with that, absolutely. Anything else?
Bring us back to God.
Reconcile us back to God. Bring us back to God. Excellent. There's maybe one more with this in this framework that I wondered if you would get to.
Give us hope.
Give us hope. Excellent.
Truth through His life.
Yes. All those are perfect answers, and some what the topic is would be the most relevant answers. But Drew, do you have any more things to say about that than just that?
About an hour.
I'll let you, brother. I'll let you.
Well, he was the very express image of God. Hebrews chapter 1. When you looked at Jesus, you were looking at God. And so everything that he did in his life was consistent with the truth of who God is.
Yes. John 18, you might be thinking about this. John 18, this, and I don't use this term lightly. People overuse words, I think. This is an awesome point in history. It really does leave you in awe with this. Jesus and Pilate are having this historical dialogue. And Jesus said something interesting in John 18, right around verse 37, I think. I don't have it written down, but he says, this great, what is truth? We all know that phrase, but what happened before that? is actually more important to me. He says, for this reason I was born, to bear witness to what? I mean, the truth. So all those answers are right. He came to seek and save which is lost. He came to be a physician. All those things are 100% true. Give us hope and destroy the works of the devil, conquer death. All those things, 100% true. But at least in that instance, when the chips, if I could say that, everything was on the table, when life was on the line, what he said to Pilate in this historical comment is the reason I came into the world was to bear witness to the truth. Because he is truth. Because God is truth. He is the image of the invisible God. He's the perfect representation of God, Hebrews that Darrell answered. So he is truth. And you think about, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I'll tell you, once you start, you talk about something to really ponder on when you're just kind of driving and you have some just downtime. Just think about this concept of truth throughout Scripture. It is everything. It undergirds. It really is the foundation of every single thing. And it's the point of this class. What is true? Which view of the world is true? Because we're going to have all sorts of voices. I'm getting a little ahead of myself and just about how worldviews are shaped. But this is, in essence, is what or who am I going to listen to? What am I going to judge what is true and what is not? And am I going to listen to the wisdom of the world? I think Darrell had that scripture last time, or Sterling in 1 Corinthians. It's going to be the wisdom of the world or the wisdom of God. Which one are you going to listen to? And it really does come down to those concepts. You know, have you ever wondered, you know, if the scripture mentions it one time, it's enough, right? We know that as Christians, from a Christian worldview. But I can't help but be impressed by the volume of scripture when something really is stressed over and over again. So why is it with lying? Why is it so just an abomination to God? And I would contend, and I'd be prepared to defend this, nothing is criticized more than lying. I've never seen anything more criticized. Why is lying, of all the things that God mentions, at least if you want to quibble with me and say there's something else, why is it one of, if not the highest form of things that God just discussed and hates and is challenged with? Do you have a thought on that?
False hope.
I can't hear you, sorry.
False hope.
False hope. Good. What else?
Breaks trust.
Breaks trust, yes.
It's a distortion of the lens.
Yes. It really does infect the lens through which you view all the big buckets we're talking about. It clouds everything, yes.
It is perhaps the most obvious characteristic of Satan himself.
You know, that's, for what it's worth, that's what I think all those are good answers. That's what I was thinking about a little bit. And because of that, it does distort the lens. So let's flush that out if I could, a little bit. And there's another antithesis to that statement too. And so, well, first of all, about why lying is, and the wisdom of God of why lying is so just the bane of God's existence. There's a couple of, I think, 2 or 3 reasons. One, in a very practical sense, here's the thing. It connects to almost every other sin. What do I mean by that? Show me a thief, I'll show you a liar. I hate this art. Show me an adulterer, I'll show you a liar. Did you take that? Nope. You with her? Nope. You have to lie to cover up other sins. So I think in the wisdom of God, if you just always tell the truth, man, your sin list is going to get a lot shorter. Because you can't cover it up with a lie. So, huge practical point there. Well, this idea of Satan, nothing defines him. He is a liar and he's a murderer from the beginning. And in John 8:44, you know that verse I bet you know that verse. And I want to quote it really close to verbatim. Jesus had this intense dialogue, you remember this, with the Pharisees. And man, they are going at it. And this is a steep and deep conversation. And he calls them the child of a devil. And he's like, your father was a murderer and a liar from the beginning. Nothing defines Satan. Nothing defines God's adversary, what Satan means. The accuser, what the devil means, more than lie. And you might say lies and death. And yet, the antithesis of that is also true, right? So you have over here, you have this other worldview of that is driven by God's adversary himself. We call Satan or the devil. And he is full of lies, and he is full of death. He's a liar and a murderer from the beginning. But think about it. What we just said about God. What we said about Jesus. So God is truth. That's why we worship him in spirit and in truth. And Jesus comes and says what? So Satan is a liar and he is full of death. And Jesus finally comes, his grand statement, when he says what? I am the way and what? The truth and the life. So nothing is, because the idea of Satan is full of lies and death. But the counter to that is nothing is more opposite of that, and consequently nothing is more true of that God is full of truth and life. And so when Jesus came bearing witness to the truth, full of grace and truth, thy word is truth, I'm sanctified by truth, the truth will set you free. I mean, overwhelming it when you start like putting it together. And so that's why it's so important to always tell the truth, because in that same scripture, it says when the devil speaks, and I don't know the Greek, but I understand that this is a very hard word, hard phrase to interpret. But most things say, when the devil speaks, he speaks from his own resources. Remember that phrase? That means when Satan speaks, and he says nothing but lies and deceit, it has to come from himself. Because God's only truth. No lies can come from God, you see? And so the challenge for this, this is not the ultimate point of the class, but I do want to just put a plug in here. So when we speak something not true, now think about this. Think of it. When you speak something not true, when you shade something, when you deceive something, it's a harsh thing to say, but you are speaking the language of the devil. Because it can't come from God because he's truth. And so when we're trying to discern and figure out which worldview to adopt, how am I going to view the world? How am I going to view why I'm here? There's deep questions. And why do I exist and who really I am? All the way down to what am I going to do tomorrow? What habit am I going to start forming or keep sustaining? Because I want to have all these voices within the world telling me something that is not true. Am I going to listen to truth, or am I going to listen to the enemy? And that really is what it comes down to. Make sense? Please.
It's kind of like if the devil came from heaven, he's cast out. What kind of lie could he have told his followers that believe it? Like they're in heaven, they can see Jesus. They've laid eyes on God. They see how glorified he is. And yet they decide to go against him because of the devil. That's just mind-blowing.
He is the ultimate deceiver in every instance throughout time. No matter what space he's in. Yeah, please.
Not to continue off on a tangent, but this really made me think of 1 John 1, where he says, if we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. We just discussed Jesus is the truth, so if we take that to its logical conclusion, if we say we have no sin, Christ is not in us.
You have to infer that. Yeah, excellent. So let's continue this thought about just this concept of how how worldviews are shaped. We've got just still several minutes here. So if you're still turning with me to the book of Psalms, I just wanted to read this. And, this is a great thing to memorize. I'll just read it for you. I'm reading from the NIV version. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. And on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever he does prospers. Not so with the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. I love that song. And I think it captures this idea of like which view of the world do you want? You know, the wicked or the righteous? Because if you really do have this God-centered, Christ-centered, biblical-centered worldview, you're going to be like the person described for us in Psalm 1 that loves God's law, that meditates it on day and night. So it's not what just, I'll use the word I for me. It's not just what I engage in intellectually. It's what I do every day. That's my work. That's my real worldview. What do I do every day? Not just what do I come and talk about or theorize about. You know, all three of us, Jarrell, Sterling, and myself, we're gonna really challenge ourselves and challenge you through this. Is like to make this super, super practical. This is what it's about. It's about just daily living, how we live every day. So with that in mind, I want to go into this a little bit. This idea of just how continue our thoughts about. We know it's about our habits, our practices. We know. And there's some more to that, but let's talk about just like how that happens throughout our lives, and that's what I'll talk about when I come back to you. Really just, and by the way, I'm not a child psychologist by any stretch of the imagination. I sell furniture for a living, so I might tell you something. So, but I can read, and I can't regurgitate, and so, but it's my understanding that 0 through 5. You know, I used to hear stuff like, oh, well, 90% of how you're shaped is before you're 5 years old. Like, I don't know about that. I was like, are you sure? Well, you dig into that a little bit. There's yes and no's to this, and so what that means really is before by you're 5 years old, you do have a worldview, but not in the way we're talking about precisely. It's just like, do you feel safe? Are people good or bad? Some of that's shaped early. Are people loving, or are they not loving? So believe it or not, even at that 5 years old, you know, those type of worldviews are shaped. You know, am I loved or not? Am I safe or am I not? So those things are super important. Well, then you get to this 6 through 12 range, and you do start thinking more, especially if you're raised within a Christian worldview or a secular worldview. You do start thinking about those things. You hear Bible stories. So we implant those things into our children from a Christian worldview. Bible stories and narratives and what's right and what's wrong and, you know, the concept of God. But with that little brain of theirs, I mean, they're still, by and large, I'm not saying when you're 12 years old, if you have this, really give your life to Christ and surrender to Him in obedience in baptism, I'm not suggesting that's not real. I'm not suggesting that at all. But by and large, for most people, you're still hanging on a lot to what your parents believe. And that's okay. That's okay. That's good. Well, this is what it gets interesting with this 13 to 18 age group. And this, a lot of times on the back half of this, 15, 16, 17, 18. Well, that's when it gets sticky because why do some kids just, because it's all about this. How that worldview in that individual is going to carry on into their critical young adult years is whether they do one of three things in my judgment from what I read in my own experience with myself and kids I love that I know well, my own children. They either going to kind of just like be a little, for lack of better words, be a little shallow, and they're going to be like, well, I just kind of believe what my parents continue to believe. They really haven't hit that crisis of thought yet. Or they're going to outright rebel against it. We all know instances like that. Or it's really going to become their own. And of course, what we want for our children, for those who are parents and parents to come in the future, or grandparents already, if I've seen this, you want to be in that third category. So I think it's just worth exploring just for a moment. And I want to ask you, what time of class is it? Really? Okay. So, let me run through this really quickly. Nothing causes a teenager or a young adult to start rejecting the faith of their parents, the faith of what they grew up in church into this. Hypocrisy. I did a deep dive of this. And then it matched my own thinking and experience well. This passage of region of this. Hypocrisy. When there is rules without relationship, because I said so, with no conversation, that causes rejection. So hypocrisy. Rules without relationship. There's real doubts are not handled seriously. Well, that's what the verse says, and that's just what it says. There's no healthy dialogue in that. So we have plenty of time. So we'll pick up this. We'll have a chance to pick up this later. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate you very much.